you're supposed to do on these shows. We'll see if I actually do that. Who knows? But the first question I want to ask you is maybe a little bit more personal, and it's around the night the race was called. The primary race was called in your favor. You got the call from John Huntsman that he had conceded the race. John Huntsman and the Huntsman family being a political institution and powerhouse in the state of Utah. John Huntsman has held the office that you're running for. He's been governor of the state of Utah. What was that night like for you?
Well, Clint, no one's asked me that question. In fact, I'd only prepared for Rage Against the Machine in Spanish Fort questions, so I've taken a little off guard here, but I'll compose myself. We, no, truthfully, we had escaped. The primary campaign had been pretty rough, and layering a pandemic on top of that, the way we were treated by our opponents, it was hard on the family, hard on my wife, and her sister invited us up to the Oregon coast for a couple days. And so you remember, of course, the primary campaign ended, people voted, and we knew we had a lead, but there were so many outstanding votes that we knew we wouldn't know for a few days. And we took off the next day, went to the Oregon coast. We were actually driving back to Utah. So it was, we were in eastern Oregon, I guess, at a gas station, a truck stop, when I got the AP called the race, and I got the call, and so it was surreal, I guess, more than anything, to be in that case. You would think, and I had always kind of imagined what that moment might be like if we were successful, kind of unbridled joy and celebration. And the truth is, it really wasn't any of that. It was mostly relief, like when you stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It's always good to do, and it feels good, and you're relieved. Unfortunately, we had heard earlier that morning that there was talk of a write-in campaign, and by the next day that was confirmed, and so I guess the celebration was short-lived a little bit, and so really it was more because of what we're going through right now, and the hard work on the pandemic and everything else. It was mostly just you check the box and you move on to the next thing.
Well, speaking of a write-in campaign, John had until the end of last month to make that decision on whether he wanted to launch a write-in campaign. It was being teased by, his family members. His wife was putting it on Instagram. There was a group that was, by all accounts, pushing him to launch this write-in campaign. He ultimately decided not to do it. He did go on another one of your former opponents' podcast, Jeff Birmingham, recently, and he was saying something around John Dugald, the state auditor, maybe throwing up a smoke signal that I don't really know what it was, but I mean, I guess the second question, just following up, given your answer, is what was your reaction at the end of last month when the decision was made not to launch a write-in campaign?
Well, I guess it was a similar reaction to the first time. Will this never end? Now, I have nothing but respect for Ambassador Huntsman, Governor Huntsman, and his family. They've been incredible to the state of Utah. I've never said anything negative, and won't. And I'm so grateful for their sacrifice and service, and just feel really fortunate with the field that we were running against. Again, not just him, but former Speaker of the House, Greg Hughes, former GOP party chair and national committee man from the state of Utah, Thomas Wright, not to mention those that didn't advance past the convention, like Jeff Birmingham, who's incredibly successful, Amy Winder Newton. It was just a murderer's row that we were up against, and the odds were certainly stacked against us. And I know it's losing an election is really hard. It's not fun. You put yourself out there and you go through all of this pain, and then if you're not successful, especially when you just assume you will be and you expect to be, that's got to be really hard for them. And so I've tried not to be critical of their reaction. I hoped I would have reacted differently had I lost, but you never know until you're in that situation.
So a lot of the criticism has been around the COVID-19 response. You're the head of the coronavirus task force for the state of Utah. How do you think the state of Utah has responded to COVID-19?
You know, I get asked that a lot, and I think about it a lot, and I'm really, I mean, I'm really proud of the way that the state has responded, and not just the state government, but the people of the state of Utah. This is just an impossible situation. I don't care where you sit, you know, what side of the fence you're on. I think it's embarrassing that we have sides of the fence on this one. Certainly, you know, in the debates and things, my opponents in the primary election criticized us for doing too much in our response, even though we had by every metric, we were one of the five, we had the least restrictions, one of the 5 states with the least restrictions. And then of course we're being criticized for not doing enough on the other side, which I think means we're threading that needle about as well as you can. From an economic standpoint, everybody in the nation, it's unequivocal that Utah has the best economy in the country right now, which is saying something. We also, it's unequivocal that we have one of the lowest mortality rates in the country. We haven't overwhelmed our healthcare system. You know, we're trying to do things the right way and get people back in the economy and get kids back to school, while still protecting the most vulnerable. And so it's imperfect for sure, but it's also, and this is one of the struggles I have with the criticism is I don't mind criticism at all, and we deserve criticism, but you have to make that criticism under the circumstances of the moment, knowing what we knew at the time. What decision would you have made? And if you would have made a different decision at that time, knowing everything that we knew, then I fully understand that. It's a lot easier to weeks or months afterwards look back and criticize, and I can do that too. You know, I can look back and say, yeah, I wish we had done this differently, but we don't get that luxury, and nobody does. And so I'm just grateful for the way that the people of Utah have responded. The business community has responded. Silicon Slopes responds. I mean, everybody really pitched in together, and these allegations of corruption and you know, self-dealing that I keep hearing about, I just, it's so frustrating because there was none of that. And people were really trying, in the way we do in Utah, really stepping up to the plate and trying to find new and innovative ways to do things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but I'm going to always err on the side of trying to fix the problem and doing more than doing less, and that's the right response.
There was an article in the Salt Lake Tribune recently, something, I think the headline was something around the line of your opponents were waiting for the John Dougal audit of the COVID-19, state's COVID-19 response. Do you have any response to that? I mean, and as you think about the what Dougal's doing, he was also a former opponent. He ran against you for governor. He was on one of the opposing tickets for governor, which makes it interesting. What do you, I mean, what, as you think about him, and you know, he's doing his job, he's the state auditor, as you think through, you know, that audit of the state's COVID-19 response, what was your response to, or what did you think when that article in the Salt Lake Tribune came out, and what response do you have just in general to the audit?
Well, I thought it was a weird article, first of all, but it's fine. The state, it didn't mention that he was an opponent of mine, and what's funny is he was being criticized for I don't know, for not getting the audit out earlier, hoping that it would make me look bad so that people could use that against me. Which again, it's a weird thing to be cheering for the state to fail. It's just odd to me, but lots of people doing that. What's interesting about that audit, and again, this is what the auditor does, and this is what we encouraged him to do, is to look at all of these decisions and to give us feedback, that as an independent person, as an independent group, to help us do better. That's the purpose of an audit. Audits aren't gotcha. That's not the idea behind an audit. And John Dougal is a consummate professional when it comes to this stuff. And I actually met with him. He sat down, answered all the questions he had. We talked about the decisions that were made, how those decisions were made, who made those decisions at the time. We have been completely transparent. I mean, every single contract, every person can go online and look at every contract, every dollar that's been spent in the coronavirus response. You can see where it went, what it went for, all of those things. And so we have not seen a draft of the audit. The way it works with the auditor when he's reviewing one of our agencies or something in the executive branch or the legislative branch is that he provides a draft of that and gives us an opportunity to respond to it, goes back, makes the evaluations, and then releases that. And so that will be coming when he's done. You know, we're not particularly worried about it because he does a really good job, and he has all of the information, all of the materials. And so we look forward to it. We think it will actually be really helpful when that feedback comes back to help us with future pandemics, future responses, and dealing with the things that we're dealing with right now.
Because it's 2020, and of course, Utah had major windstorms this past week. And, you know, you're seeing semi-trucks getting blown over. You're seeing trees in Salt Lake and northern Utah getting blown over. What's the response been to that from the state perspective? And what message do you have to Utahns during this crazy year?
Well, we're a hardy people. We're a resilient people. That's the foundation of our state. You know, I live on a farm right here that shouldn't be a farm. It's mainly rocks, and yet they stuck with it. And we haul rocks every year off our farm. Most farmers laugh at that. They've never heard of that. Every time we plow the fields, we haul rocks. And so we get what it means to be tough and resilient. But certainly this is challenging even the most hardy of Utahns to have on top of everything else, earthquake, social unrest, the pandemic, of course, and now we had a hurricane that impacted millions of Utahns, you know, along the Wasatch Front, and the devastation for those that haven't been able to see it. I mean, it's truly remarkable. If you remember, in 2011, we had something similar, although it was more Davis County that took the brunt of that impact. This was just like that, only spread across 5 counties, and so the response has been exactly what you would expect from people in Utah. We were out yesterday, well, day before and yesterday, and going out again today. We're going to be in Rose Park this afternoon, hauling logs and splitting wood and doing those things that a lot of us grew up doing, but just didn't expect it to be in people's backyards and front yards. And it's a good year to be in the fencing business. If you do roofing, you've got a lot of work right now, but so much damage. And my message to Utahns is thank you for being you. You know, they don't wait for the government to come and clean up their yard or their neighbors' yards. They're always 5 steps ahead of us. Governor did declare a state of emergency yesterday, which will help us allow for some of the funding that is needed for the cleanup process, and so that will continue. But man, I've always said that the worst of times brings out the best of people in Utah, and certainly we saw that the last couple of days.
You mentioned the social unrest that's been happening, and that there's a number of things that are kind of lingering over this election, and in particular the presidential election that's happening this year. And the social unrest is a big one, COVID-19 being one that we just talked about as well. And there's been a number of Black Lives Matter protests throughout the state of Utah, in downtown Salt Lake City, in downtown Provo. There was one in Moab. I think a lot of various places have, had these protests come up, spurred by the, killing of George Floyd. And a lot of the calls from these protests is like, defund the police, reform the police. What's your response and overall message to those who were out there protesting?
Yeah, so it's just such an interesting time. We live, it used to be that, the saying that all politics is local. I mean, that was just a given. And I have to say, that's completely flipped on its head now. No politics is local. All politics is national now. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But when it comes to this specific issue, we do this thing now where you have to take a side. And, of course, I've said this many times, politics has become religion. And if you're a Republican, you have to hate Democrats, and vice versa. It's very true. It's true of the coronavirus response. Either, you're pro-masks or you're anti-mask, or you're pro-economy or you're pro-health. You have to choose one of those sides. And certainly we're seeing that here. Either you're pro-racial equality or you're pro police, right? Which is so stupid. It makes absolutely no sense. You can adamantly be opposed to what happened to George Floyd, and be opposed to what happened to Mr. Blake, be opposed to what happened to the 13-year-old with autism that was shot recently in Salt Lake, and still support our police and our first responders and the great work that they're doing. And you can support the good things that are happening with our first responders and the great work that they're doing here, and be opposed to racial injustice. We do have there are systemic inequalities that exist. They just do. We are all biased. We've been part of our response to this was that the governor and our staffs have all gone through some implicit bias training, which is just fascinating. And look, this is not about being woke. It's about learning how the human brain functions and why we are the way we are. And I will never know what it is like to be a Black man in Utah. I can't have that experience. It's impossible for me to do that. And so what the question is then, what can we do? Well, so there's two things we have to focus on. We have to focus on us individually, and then we have to focus on the systems that are out there. So individually, we can reach out to people who are different than us, and we can listen and we can learn. We can get proximate, as Brian Stevenson talks about in Just Mercy. And I've talked to Brian many times about this concept of getting proximate, and it's something we've been doing. We've been meeting with Black families and Latino families across the state, and just listening. Tell me what's happened to you in the last year that would surprise me. And it's been stunning. To hear some of the story, and I knew, but I didn't know, if that doesn't make sense, but it does in my mind. And it's really heartbreaking to hear these stories. And then there's the system piece, and there are some great changes. I've got a list of 20 things that we're working on right now. A lot of them with our police force, and they want help. They do. We do need more training. We're asking our cops to do things they were never trained to do and have never been expected to do. We're calling them out in situations where they should never be called out, and they will be the first ones to tell you that. One of the things that Utah has actually been ahead of the curve on, there's this big announcement in Denver that they're going to start with these mobile crisis outreach teams. We started this years ago, and we've added funding to it the last couple of years. But when someone is having a mental health episode, we call 911 and often send a cop and an ambulance and a firefighter, and those are very expensive, and they are not trained to solve these issues, right? Now we send mobile crisis outreach teams, and that's what should have happened with the 13-year-old. And it's a minivan with 2 mental health professionals, and they go and they take care of the situation. It saves people money, saves them embarrassment, and it saves lives. About half of the police shootings we have in our state involve some sort of mental health episode. So we could eliminate half of them just by doing that. So those are some of the major steps. Just yesterday, we announced that new police officers going through the academy will receive significant training, about 18 hours in dealing with these types of crises and de-escalation training, and another, I think, 13 hours in using less deadly means of force. And so real change is happening in powerful ways that hasn't happened before, and people should be excited about that. This isn't just kind of a around the edges stuff that maybe it'll go away in a few weeks. This is real core change, and Utah is leading out, and I'm excited about that, and everyone should be excited about that.
There have been protests in the other direction, although I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that, other direction. But Pat Bagley, who's a political cartoonist for the Salt Lake Tribune, put out a cartoon, I believe, on September 1st, of a police officer going into a doctor's office and getting an x-ray, and in that x-ray it shows that the police officer has a hood, like basically just calling the police officer who's in that doctor's office a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And on the back of his jacket, the police officer's jacket in the cartoon, it says law enforcement. And you've had a lot of police officers and law enforcement agencies come out and condemn that cartoon. Do you have any response to, I mean, we're talking about a political cartoon, but do you have any response to, because that's really touched a nerve throughout the state of Utah?
Yeah, it touched a nerve with me. It sucked and it was stupid and Pat's an idiot. And that's my response. It doesn't help anything. It really doesn't. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. I mean, you can't sit there and say, and look, I get it. There are people on the right that are absolutely as guilty as the same dumb stuff. But that, what does that do? How does that help in any way? How does that make anyone, any police officer, any of their family, anybody that is trying to bring change, when that's the kind of message that gets sent out, everybody retreats, right? They start to be vulnerable. They're coming to the table. We're trying to work on some change together, and then somebody with and we don't just get to say, oh, it's just a political cartoon. We don't get to say that. It's someone who represents a very powerful voice in the community, the Salt Lake Tribune, that has been the standard bearer for many years, and it's he should apologize, and he hasn't. And so, and look, again, I get it. Now somebody can come at me with with 50 different examples on the other side, and that's the problem. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It doesn't move the ball forward, and it doesn't help. And painting, which it did, and I don't care how you try to paint it, you look at that cartoon and it's basically calling cops members of the KKK. And are there racist cops? Yes, there are. There absolutely are. They should be weeded out. They should be fired. That is absolutely true, and that is correct. But you can't paint with a broad brush like that and then hope people will come together.
Another thing that's really dividing the country, our state, and I'm sure it even looms over your general election here, is the presidential election. We got Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, and every day the news is just absurd about what's happening inside of this campaign. And I probably got you in a little trouble during your primary election. I asked it. I think I'm the one who asked you if you support Donald Trump. And I think that kind of your response to that kind of haunted you throughout. Well, maybe didn't I am, but it probably even helped you. But my bad, I guess I should say, on the Donald Trump question, because I hosted that debate in January. But have you changed any of your opinions or thoughts towards Donald Trump? You are a Republican. He is the leader of your party. He is running for re-election. As you look at the presidential election, what message do you have to the state of Utah?
So no, and you should ask that question. That was an important question to ask, and you'll remember everyone on that stage said that they supported the president, and that is part of this two-party system that we have. I wish it was different. It's not different. As the Republican nominee for the state of Utah, my job is to support the Republican nominee. There are many things I wish were very, very different, and I've been very clear on that. I had billboards that were put up against me because of things that I had said 4 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, and so what I there is nothing that I can do to change what's happening at that national level. It continues to devolve. It continues to worsen across the board. What I've tried to do is try to show that we can be different here in the state of Utah. That we can show that there is a better way. Look, when I decided to run for governor, it was a really hard decision for Abby and I, but we decided if we were going to do it, that we just made a promise to each other that we would do it differently. And one of the things we wanted to do differently is we wanted to prove that you could win an election without being negative, without attacking your opponents. And we made that, and it was the right thing to do, and it was awesome, and it was easy until it wasn't. And I've got to be honest. When you're getting attacked at every turn, when your opponents are ganging up on you, when they're saying things that aren't true, and by the way, we had a 10-point lead going into June. And we watched every week as those negative mailers and those negative ads on TV and those negative billboards and just the negative attacks that came during the debates. We watched every week a couple points just slipped away, and all the political minds in Utah and the pollsters and everybody else is telling me, you've got dirt on all of these guys, just go after them, it's all true, it's all fair game, just go attack, and you'll win. And there were gut check moments there where we looked at each other and said, hey, if we do this, we're going to win, and if we don't, we'll probably lose. It's going to be really, really close. And we had to make a decision in that moment. How bad did we want this, and what was more important to us? And we both, my wife and I, looked each other in the eye, and we had that moment, and we just said, no, it's not worth it. We would rather lose. If that's what it takes to win, then we don't want to win. But if we win, maybe, just maybe, there will be some copycats out there, because that's all, what political campaigns are. It's just, well, who did what and who won? Well, let's copy what they did. And maybe some people who wouldn't run for office because it is so negative and you have to throw dirt at your opponent will be willing to do it because we showed them a different way. And so I can't defend everything the president says or does, and I'm not going to. I can't defend what's happening at the national level all the time, and I'm not going to. But all I can do is say we're going to do things differently here, and we're going to try to show that there's a positive way. We're going to try to bring people together. If that works, great, and if it doesn't, somebody else can do this job.
Finally, Lieutenant Governor, you are still in the middle of the general election. You're running against Chris Peterson, and he's called for you to issue a mask mandate, or I guess encourage Governor Herbert to issue a mask mandate. I don't think you personally, in your current role, can issue that mask mandate. And that's been a big attack from him, at least up to this point. What is your response to issuing a mask mandate?
Well, I'm in this unique role where I'm I'm still the lieutenant governor, and that's the one job that I have. I have sworn an oath to, and part of being lieutenant governor is working with the governor and supporting the governor. He has done a tremendous job during this response, and I don't think he's gotten nearly enough credit. He has been the face of this. My heart breaks for the guy. He becomes governor at the worst possible time. We were at about 8% unemployment, headed to 9. This was in 2009. Wakes up one day and just finds out, oh my gosh, I'm the governor, and in the middle of the Great Recession, and this was supposed to be a little bit of a victory lap for him this year, and it's turned out to be even worse than when he took over, and so he's tried to balance all of those competing interests and do it in the right way. What he said was, look, I think I think people will do the right thing. We were told by Scott Gottlieb and other medical professionals across the country that if you can get above 60% mask usage, that you would see a decline in cases, and so that was our big push. Can we get above 60%? We survey this every week, and we're at about 75% mask usage across the state. We're doing very well. We would love to be higher, but his philosophy and our philosophy has always been that if you can get people to do things without being compelled to do it, you're just better off. It's in our nature to push back when the government tells us what to do. It's part of that rugged individualism that we so appreciate here in the state of Utah. And so he's also given, we're local government people. I was a city councilman, a mayor, county commissioner. He was a county commissioner. We've always believed that government closest to the people is best. And so you can't say that and then only believe it when they do what you like. right? You have to be true to that, and he has, and given them these local opportunities, which has been remarkable. And I'm grateful that he was able to do that. We, like I say, in Fairview, we've been socially distancing for 160 years. It's just kind of what we do out here. And so I'm grateful for the way he responded, and I appreciate you letting me come on and being one of the first person on this new program. Clint, you're great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Finally, I do have to ask you this just in the last 30 seconds here. You are, I guess the general election kind of officially is kicked off now that Labor Day has passed. What is your message to Utahns as they go to the polls or put in their mail-in ballots here over the next month or two as to your vision for the future of Utah?
Sure. You're going to be hearing a lot more of this over the next coming weeks and the next month and a half as we lead up to the general election. But the economy has to be a focus for all of us, and rebuilding to what? I don't want to go back to where we were. I want to go to something better. And there are certainly some opportunities that Utah will be able to take advantage of. But we have to make sure that everyone gets to participate in the economic growth that's happening in our state. That includes rural Utah. That includes people on the west side of the valleys along the Wasatch Front. That everybody gets an opportunity to enjoy this incredible economic growth. And then more importantly than that, I believe, is education and what we need to do there. Clint, I'm telling you, man. Look, we talk about teaching a man to fish, right? And that's better than giving a man a fish. And you've been fishing a lot lately. You agree with that. And I think everybody, that's not controversial, right? We always agree that that's better. And yet, if you live in certain schools, in certain areas, certain zip codes in Utah, we teach you to fish by giving you a speedboat and a graphite rod and one of those fish finders. And man, you learn how to fish and you're going to be very successful. You're going to be fine. And then for kids in rural Utah and some other zip codes, some of those West Side schools and some of our multicultural communities, we give them a stick and a string, and we can't imagine why they don't learn how to fish as well as others. And that disparity has to change. We've got to do more, and we've got to do better, and we're going to do that in a Cox Anderson administration.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clint. Keep up the good work.